It's Saturday in the studio. I got a little bit of a late start. Well, that's not true. I was working. I was working through the morning on other stuff. And I actually, as an introvert, got my butt downtown to buy a bunch of brushes from the art store. And then I also went to the Center for Crafts, Nova Scotia. Boy, I sure hope I got that right. Where today was the closing day for two really great shows. Janet Mcpherson is a Canadian artist. At Janet Mcpherson, you should check her out, from I believe Hamilton, and she's got it's the last day, but you can see all sorts of everything on her Instagram feed and her website too. But the show is called Hybrid Land, and it's over like 100 figurines of these strange creatures, which are hybrids and made out of, it looks like porcelain clay, unglazed, but then they've got these weird swath of bandages on them and then gold detail, and some of them are doing things to each other. We'll just leave it at that, procreating into more hybrid things. And then there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 or so bigger pieces that go along to the side of the show. So again, Janet Mcpherson, Hybrid Land, check that out, because yay Canadian ceramics. Also Kate Gray, who not so recently, you graduated a couple of years ago from NASCAD, the Nova Scotia Art College, but she had a just like a couple day pop-up show called Spaghetti and Candy, and it's this amazing like stacked up weirdness of hair pieces like barrettes and this and that and combs and such. And then there's a great video of her doing a artist talk into a microphone, which is actually a hairbrush, and quite funny. Unfortunately, the weather was so all over the place, spring Canadian crazy, you know, like really it was so lovely yesterday, and now today is like a mix of wind and snow flurries and sun again, and that's probably the same for a lot of you in borderline America, or border state America too, at least the northern border. Anyway, I just missed them, actually seeing Kate and her beau partner Kaz, but I'm sure I'll run into them again. But both fantabulous shows, and I should look that up quickly, but I can't. But if you go, she was in the Lair Gallery, the pop-up gallery, and it's Kate Gray. I think it's Kate Gray Studio on Yale Instagram that you should check out. Today's a bit of an experimentation day, because I am not, as mentioned many times, a China painting expert, but I thought I would go through some of the things that I'm thinking about and that are going to go on for these chicken, hen, turkey things a little bit later. But I first wanted to update you with what's going on with this crazy piece here. If you can see it, it is, can you see it? And I'm sure I'm filming this in the right perspective. I always forget if I should like have the camera tilted one way or the other way. But these are, I added some more doodads on the sides up top here. In the last video I talked about like just it not being balanced quite so well, and I added these nickel nichrome earrings, and I'm not certain if they'll last, if they'll make it through the firing, because you know clay shrinks quite a bit, but they have these little earrings on there. There's going to be maybe some like tassel action hanging off the sides of there, so I wanted to leave a little bit of space where the nichrome wire is, and then a little bit of space here. I'm not going to try and situate them on but like on Instagram, you can see yesterday I posted these accompanying pigeons with fez hats on. Before they had earphones, kind of like the Ming Dragon that I had. But I decided that this would be a little bit stranger, because why not, right? Anyway, these just two accompanying fezzed pigeons that will be on these platforms here, kind of like go-go dancers. And of course, as I was like unveiling it from plastic this morning, one of the pigeons fell over, and his fez hat fell over. So he's in a little bit of a state of repairs. I put a little tiny slip of slip mixed with white the white Mako Stroke and Coat Cottontail to make kind of a little bit of an on-gobe, and hopefully if I just don't breathe on it or touch him, it'll fuse together again. And either, I have a feeling it's probably safer for me to epoxy them on, just because things move within every firing, of course. So I don't want them to like fall off and da-da-da-da-da. But we'll see. I may chance it. You know, that's that. But so that's where that's at, and that's gonna be one long glazing process. I'm just gonna put Mr. Pigeons down here because they're so crazy, they're so fragile. But that's where that's going. And so what I usually do to dry them out is I leave them lightly covered in plastic for a couple days, just so everything starts to kind of even out dry. Like I don't seal it underneath or anything like that. But because I have a decal printer that's sequestered to my shipping room, which is a shit show, I put on, and it's also like in the summertime, not right now, but in the summertime it gets quite humid here sometimes. So I have a dehumidifier, just a small one that I have to empty out like once or twice a day, just depending on what's going on with the weather. But it's really great for recycling clay. I've got a big clay mold that I, put all my mulch together, recycling scraps. And then it's my drying room too. So if I need mugs and things to dry out, like literally one day or maximum two, again with the mugs too, I will decorate them with mishima, and then I will leave them out just so the handles don't pop off or anything like that, and then I'll bung them in my printing room. So it's kind of a gong show of things going in there. But this is where I'll put this piece in maybe a couple days, because I think it's he, I'm not quite certain, but it's quite meaty, and so I want to let things even out a little bit. But moving on from that was just sort of a preemptive thing to things. But moving on from that, I'm also wearing a super unflattering IKEA apron today because my Laura Vanderlyn apron is in the wash. I got it quite mucky this past week, so it needed a little dewy do. So here are my updated hens, so to speak. I'm going to turn down this so you can see what's going on. It's a little bit hard because I've got I thought I would never work in a basement again, but I do have one small, it's okay source of natural light, so it happens to be streaming in at quite a glary angle. But hopefully you can see what's going on here. I have something going on right in front of here, so I'll bring it as close as I can. Or maybe I'll bring the other one closer. So you probably saw on ye old Instagram that things were quite matte before. And so what I had done, again, is I had applied this cottontail glaze, the white cottontail glaze, in hopes that it would act as a bit of a maiolica, right? And it sure did. But I wanted to layer some stuff over top of it before I took it to cone 5, the first glaze firing. So basically I was adding underglazes and Mako Stroke and Coats as, and again, they're self-glazing. I was layering them on, and then I was sintering them on, so just getting them to sort of stick at cone 010. So they were quite matte, and I really wanted this part to maybe stay matte, the chicken choking part, but that's okay. I've learned that with ceramics, you never know what to expect, even if it's like electric firing, which seems to be like the most stable thing. But I'm actually super pleased with the results that I've got going on here. The bottom is sort of like an Easter egg hunt gone, ballistically wild, and I can't wait to get in there with China paints, which is what I'm going to kind of swing back and talk to today. Again, a little bit experimental. So those of you in the China paint know, do not bug me too much. Also, fancy bottoms too. Took the time to carve the bottom and glaze them up. This guy had a little bit of a problem with. I actually fired them on a couple of like kiln posts, and I should have kiln washed them, but I didn't. Whatever, I'm a little bit lazy that way. But when I'm drying them out, like bisque firing them, I think it's important to have air going through the bottom, because how many of you have put like a heavy piece in and it gets partway through the bisque fire and then you hear the poof, 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 which is your bisque, your greenware exploding. It sucks. So there's no ventilation in the bottom. So what I do is I stick a couple of posts underneath, one, probably can't say one and one. And as long as it's got like 3 touching points, then it sits on top of there. But this brother, this chicken brother here, or I guess it's not right, chicken something sibling here, had a little bit of glaze runnage, so it actually stuck to the kiln post. But I just spent a few minutes like dremeling the bottom, so I'll make it all work. Fancy bottoms too. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this down just a little bit, the light down just a little bit, and I might not look. Doesn't matter how I look, but just because it's a little, the natural light's battling me a little bit. I just wanted to maybe zoom in. I'll bring him up, her up here a little bit closer. But if you can see what's going on a little bit is that the red that I dabbed on there is quite marshmallowy, right? I dig that. I'm totally fine with that. So I wanted it to be matte. I'll figure that out for the next one. That's not a big problem. That's not a big problem whatsoever. But how can I introduce matte in there again? And so China paint is a good way, but not all China paints are created equal. Sometimes the now defunct Amico ones that I have, they actually can get quite glossy, like the black and the blues can get quite glossy. And then I find that the reds are actually quite dull. Well, they're not reds. Well, I have reds, but that's not what I want to use on here, like a rose red. So sometimes it can be a little bit duller and more matte, so to speak. So that's kind of what I'm after here today, is to figure out how to do that for one thing. And then also, I mean, it's so funny. Every time I think of, every time I work on animals, I find that they're not, they don't have a soul until they have like pupils. And so even though I dotted the pupil with a black underglaze dot the other day and then fired it up to cone 5, the pupil actually ran. So now it's kind of got this sort of Chrissy Hines eyeliner look to it, which I'm gonna work on a little bit today as well. I'm super happy with what's happening with this black and white and dotted thing. Again, I'm all about it. Some people could call them mistakes, but maybe you can see them in here. But they're these, like, if I can point it out exactly, like there's these weird little crack lines that happen where the underglaze has broken over top of because it's supposed to be under a glaze, right? But it's slightly broken with the melting of the cottontail. So that's kind of cool. But I'm just gonna pull this back for 1 second here and show you what's going on here. So I'm going down here for a minute. You can see what's going on. So Mariko is a mass experimenter with things. Ooh, this makes me a little bit nervous. These chickens spinning around on my uneven table surface. Again, my defunct Amico China paints. So we can think about them, but then we cannot think about them. They're there. I also buy, and these pots are also the exact same as what's going on in here, but they have a little bit more glycerin in them, so they've been kept into a semi flux state, if you can, or semi liquid state is what I'm saying. It's not that they're gelatinous, but they have a glycerin feel to it. Does that make sense? So they're not super watery and they're not oily at all. I have tried oil-based China paint mixing and I get really, really frustrated with it. So I go for the water-based stuff. I have friends who send me China paints from here, there, and everywhere, and a lot of times they come and I couldn't find, like, I know where they are now. A friend who sent me a bunch, they come in these like long glass vials. I tend not to gravitate towards them too much because they have lead in them, even though lead is so freaking beautiful. Best not to use them on food safe-wares if you're going to use them. And then, you know, how do you dispose of them? So there's that to think about. So I've been trying to experiment with, I've been trying to experiment with water-based China paints. So there's a company in Ontario called Pottery Supply House, sorry. And, oh, there's some blue that dunked in there. As you can see, this is why China painters hate me, is because I'm so not regimented or clean about anything. Let me just blow that off a little bit. But this, I can't remember the actual price of it, and I'm sure it fluctuates, so why bother? But I know it was a really, really good deal for basically, you know, a container that's not quite full per se, but it's got a lot of this pigment in it. And what do they call it? They just call it Series something leadless overglaze, which is fine by me. I'm happy to pick that up. So what I do is I take a little tiny spoon, or if I'm really lazy, pop a little bit on, you know. And sometimes I'm really lazy, and Remus was like, I'm sure Remus wasn't scolding me about it, but sometimes I actually just am like so lazy I dump it in something and start mixing it around with a paintbrush, or actually with a spoon, and I'll kind of grind it up. Because the China paint, as fine as it is, it still has a little tiny bit of grit to it, right? So what I in theory want to do is mash up those granules to get them together and infused with your medium. Now, again, I can't even speak to the oil-based mediums. I won't even, because I know that there's so many people, and I'm not going to name drop. You can figure out who those great China painters among us are. So that's cool. But I really wanted to try and figure out the whole water-based stuff. So I mentioned in a previous video a company called The Good Stuff. I know. And it used to be out of Washington, and now it's somewhere out of Miami, and I haven't actually contacted them. But there's some, it's called Josephine's medium, and there's quick drying medium, there's medium drying medium, and then there's fast drying medium. And I think I got the fast drying medium. So it says painting and pen work, and clean with water, mix and paint, dries hard. That's all there is. Oh, actually, this stuff is actually, it says out of Colorado, but she may have moved around. Anyways, it's www.thegoodstuff.com. Maybe she sold the business. But I know, I can tell it from the smell of it. Isn't that like freaky ceramic weird? Like I know that if I smell Fritz and things in the Glaze kitchen, so to speak, I know what they smell like now after decades of doing this racket. But this smells like a combination of glycerin, and it smells like a combination of alcohol, which is maybe where the quick drying comes in, and who knows what goes on beyond that. I know Remus will probably chime in with all sorts of things. Is there not like an antifreeze thing that you can put in there too, that some people use? Again, I try to go down the rabbit hole of following directions, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work in my head. So I pick and choose the things that I like, and if it's sticking to my piece and firing on right, I am a-okay with that. I also picked up this tiny little palette knife, and so what I'm doing, and this is actually quite a bit of China paint here or pigment, yeah, overglazed pigment that I have mixed up. So what I do is I just mash it in there and go to town. I do know that some artists use flat, oh, that might have been a little bit much, 7-Up or Sprite, if wherever you are, whatever you call it, and the sugary content of that helps to keep things in place when it's drying, right? So I'm doing this for you, Remus Viscerta, because you're like, you should really smash it down. So kids, just smash it down that way. The thing with using straight up glycerin is that it's, and you can buy that at your local drugstore. And it's usually just sold in a bottle called glycerin, and I don't know what it's used for. I have no idea actually what section it's found in. But if you just use straight up glycerin, it's got a really, really, really slick feel to it. Almost like oil, but not like oil. It's very odd. And I find the whole thing about like China painting really hard to get into. And you know that old adage, like super old school adage, like you should chew your food 32 bites or chews or something like that. Or you should wedge your clay this, 100 times or whatever it is. I know that there's probably an old adage for that here. I'm pretty messy with my China paints. It's only the black that I use for really detail, like detail, painting fine lines and things. So this stuff tends to get dabbed on and used in a very, very watercolor way. So I'm pretty sure that there are some China painting people out there who who do this, follow the procedure and do this for many, many minutes or, I don't know, half an hour or whatever you're supposed to do it with. But by doing it on I should say this is just a commercial tile surface, I get a little bit of, you can mash the, the pigment down. So, like if I just dump shit in my teacup here, my found teacup, and swish it around, sometimes I do this, and then what I do is, and probably what I'll do today is just like pop it in there. The other thing that I do is I go to said craft store and I buy these kind of things, right? These little tiny vials, and I put them in there. So what I find sometimes though is after I mixed up the overglaze with the glycerin is maybe I've like added, or the water medium here, is that I've added a little bit too much. And so I could either maybe, mix it up with a little bit more pigment. But what I found just for me, is that I'll add a little tiny dab. A little dab will do ya. You gotta be this old to ride that ride, about that hair product. But I will add like the tiniest bit of cornstarch. Again, I know that there are formulas out there for you to figure out, it's like there's correct ways of doing it. There's correct ways of doing it. But what the cornstarch does, I find, is that it gives it a little bit more tooth and workability. And so I've just found, just by farting about with this, oh, see, now it's getting really pasty here, is that I toggle back and forth between adding a little bit more of the medium. You can add straight up glycerin to it if you find it's like this is now almost like impasto, like it's an impaster. So I could add straight up glycerin to it, and that'll sort of act as a softener and get back in there. But I always tend to want to work with a little bit more, or like store it with a little bit more on the impasto side of things. Anyway, what I'm going to do is add just a tiny, I'm going to, it's like going back and forth and back and forth. So just the tiniest drop of this is what I'm going to add again. And then add that in there. And away we go. This is how lazy I am. I'm going to actually just finish mixing this really quickly. And I'm going to dump it in here. I'm so bad. Like, this is so bad. For some reason, I use this rose pink color quite a bit. So, it just hangs out in my studio. I don't even cover it. It's probably full of so much dust and this and that, but I'm not using it for detail or anything, so it's just, I haven't had any problem with it. World's laziest potter, ceramic-y person. So, I'm just going to scrape it into this teacup. And in this magic teacup, like this was sitting on the shelf and it had dried out China paint mixed up. I had actually added a little bit of water to it. So, oh, look how many brushes I got from the old artist store. Can you see them? They're not the most expensive ones, that's for sure, because I'm pretty hard on my brushes too. So when I pulled this teacup off the shelf, I added a little bit of just water to it. Water works too. And I'm just going to give it a mix to mix with the existing stuff that's in there. And this particular brush holds a lot of pigment, so I don't want to waste all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to dunk. I mean, this is just how I do it. When it, like, plunk it in water and get a little bit out of there. This time I'm not going to rinse this off right now because, you know, that's a waste of a gloop of stuff. But what I've got is this really nice kind of thick stuff going on here. And what I sometimes do is I add a little dab of water, you know, like, and it creates not a puddle or a pool in the bottom, but it's like maybe a quarter teaspoon, maybe a half a teaspoon of water, and I use that kind of in conjunction with the pasty stuff that's on the sides there. So if it's too pasty, I can just drag a little bit of water back up in there. Again, this is so not technically precise whatsoever. But what I can do with this now is I can bring Mrs. Chicken Hen over here, and maybe I'll use my new brushes too, is that I can pull this up here, maybe like a combination. I'll hold the teacup up, and I'm going to use an older brush for this part, but I know that using this particular pigment from Pottery Supply House, it fires actually quite matte for me. And again, I haven't experimented with that many China paints. Sometimes I use like if I had a little tiny bit of a sponge, you can. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to tear off a little bit of sponge here, but cosmetic sponges are really fine. Someone like Kurt Weiser is like such a genius with all the different tools that he applies China paint with. But depending on how you want to, you know, like, of course you can brush it on and get a fine line with a brush if you've got detail. But say you want to, you know, have a mottled speckled effect, which is what I want to do. I want to bring in just a little bit of matte back into these sort of throaty areas, and also his turkey bum over here. So can you see his turkey bum? I'd like to be matte, just to create a bit of a difference, because the whole thing is very, very glossy right now. And so what I'll do, again, like I mentioned before in one of the videos, you know, like, why do I use so many different products? And because they all fire a little bit differently. And I find that layering things sort of pulls things apart and gives you those different textures and different feels for your eye to, whether it's conscious or not, you know, kind of take them in different depths, so to speak. And I'm moving pretty quick over this, and I find that this good stuff dries pretty. I chose the quick drying stuff because I'm impatient, but I find that it does. I don't know how fast it dries, to be completely honest. But like, I should cover this. I should really put it in a container. But for some reason I use this rose color so much, I just often leave this out. Sometimes I put something over top of it. But because this is water based, I just add a tiny drop of water to it. You know, in the first thing in the morning, I let the dogs go out, and then I come down and I dunk my little containers in water, so that when I come down about half an hour or so later than that, if I don't have too much else going on, then they're ready to go. So I could do this and just leave it as is, but that would be so un-Mariko-like. And you can use your fingers. As far as I know, there's no lead in it. You know, I guess if you're a rubber glove person, you can absolutely do that. But I'm fine. I'm just gonna go in there and, like, you know, if it's overlapped on areas that I want to remove. Like, I like the idea of this being sort of satin matty, and I like the idea of this being glossy. So I'll toggle back and forth. I'm always striving, like in my drawings, for hints of imperfection, because they always feel like perfection to me in the end. So I'm not worried if, like, that everything's so super even. What I might do is find a finer brush or a finer brush or sponge, for some reason, I'm really hard on this particular brush. And let's move this guy out of the way, the other new brush. So like say with this tile, it's kicking around. I'm actually sort of destroying this brush by doing this. I know, but you know, that's why I buy multiple cheap brushes. So now I'm stippling it with the same thing, but I'm going back in there and I'm giving it it's just giving it a little bit of a different texture. Same material, different texture over top, so that you just got layers of visual information. So that's what I'll do there. Again, I'm really happy with this weird marshmallow effect that's gone on here. Again, cottontail, Mako stroke and coat, then some blobs of, and then some, the cottontail Mako stroke and coat, then blobs of wax dots, and then on top of that, the black spectrum underglaze, and then I fired it once, and then I went back in and I put some more white, so it's got more white cottontail, so now it's got this really ghostly feel to it, which is really lovely. So now my challenge is dipping down to a different firing range. So these guys, in my experience, have been best fired, like at least these couple of materials, or overglaze materials, have been best fired at about 0.16. And this is just stage one. These hens or whatever they are will probably have about 3 to 5 more firings on top of it. I may just concentrate on the neck area, the head area, and I also might concentrate on the bum area, and I might actually use a little bit of this China paint. I'm actually just using straight up water on here. Oh, and there's something in there. Like there's something on the brush as well. Oh well, whatever, we'll just work it in there. But I'm actually just using it right off there because I just want something a little bit smoother. And I'm gonna just brush over there. So that'll make these flowers like a tiny bit more matter. Not mad, matter. And then we'll refocus. We'll fire and refocus and fire and refocus. Of course, if you don't like something, it's hard to get it off, right? But you just work with it. You add another layer and you just keep firing that sucker till it does what you want it to do. Going with the flow I was not brought up to do that. That is not in my nature. Not that I'm a control freak. I don't know what my therapist would say about that, but I'm trying very hard to. I'm actually quite successful at going with the flow when it comes to ceramics. I am going to take one of these littler brushes, and again, in a previous video, somebody asked me if I use like brushes that were like one hair, but one hair doesn't hold enough. Doesn't hold any pigment, right? So you need a few hairs there. And then I might, oh yeah, this is actually already, no, not quite firmed up, but that's okay. I can go in and fix that, but for time's sake, I just want to show you what I might do with the eyes. Again, it's the closest I get to doing something with makeup, right? So let me just slide myself over here. I have got a lid full of, you know, when you like shake something and you get a little bit on the lid. That's all I actually work with, except for this isn't that fluid now, this old Amico stuff. But it's got a little bit of glint to it, which means it's got a little bit of sheen to it. And again, I'll pull in a tiny bit of water and keep a little bit at bay there. But I like all the stuff that like coagulates around the rim. That's like the perfect consistency for me. So these guys are quite cartoony, but I'd actually like to make them a little bit more serious. So let's put an eyeball in there, right? And actually, I can tell that that's maybe a tiny bit too watery, but I'll actually spend quite a bit of time. Closest thing to makeup is I'll get in there and make this eye a little bit moody. Let's actually bring this closer because I don't think you can see that very well. Oops, pop this over here. And then we'll pop this really close here. There you go. There you go. Now you can see the eye action, right? And so I'll go in there, and I want to give him like, I should probably really consult some kind of, you know, historical picture again. And I might undo this, like I might undo this, but because I don't want it to look too cartoony. I want it to still have that sort of distant historical, like a lot of those pieces have a, like, I'm not looking at you, or I want it to be funny, but I don't want it to be too funny. So this is something that might actually take me quite a little bit of time to finish. And my laundry's done upstairs. And I brought in a little bit too much water there. So I'll just move that around. And when you do that, then you have to let things set up a little bit again. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 eyeballs to work on. And undoubtedly, I think I have, this might be good too, for the makeup guru. This is a little bit of gray here. And if I want to make gray, I can just put, of course, white and black. This is a sort of a bluey gray, but I want to make him look a little, I was thinking about this, oh, that's it. I wanted to make his eyes look a little bit distressed. Like maybe he was tired of running. Oh, see? And then, this is where the watercoloriness happens. It gets to the point where you have to be careful because there's enough water in the pigment that it could actually just pull and create a drip. That's not the worst thing in the world. That's not the worst thing in the world. But it takes a little bit of, I can't even say finesse because it's never planned or learned for me. But if you can see there, his eyes, like, yeah, see, there's that eye versus this eye. Oh, look, that eye ran, so that's going to be fun to fix or work with. So what I will do after that, and maybe I should have prepped this, but you know, it's like the unpredictability that I like of things. What I'll probably do after that is let that set up for, I don't know, like 10 minutes or so, and then go back in with a little bit, maybe more gray with a tiny bit of black mixed in. I suppose I should have like one of those palette things for mixing colors and this and that, but I don't. So oftentimes I'll just drag a little bit of one color and put it in the tiny corner of something else. But you know, you can do whatever. That's just personal taste. Whatever you want to do to make yourself feel comfortable. So I'm kind of pushing the envelope here because it is still sloopy slidey, but maybe that will work for me. And if it doesn't work for me at this stage, then I can absolutely just wipe it back and responge a little bit with the rose color and then go back in. But I'm actually quite digging it. How about that? How often does that happen on camera? How often am I on camera? Never. So huzzah. So I can tell that I added a tiny bit too much. So I just take a wetted brush and I pull it back there. So yeah, what I'll do is let that sit up for about 10 minutes and then I'll like focus. I might dab some white China paint in around here, over glaze in around here, and do the push and pull thing to get it to where I want it to. But now I'm looking at what it was originally in the marshmallow thing, so I'm kind of missing that. We'll see. This is a chapter in a saga to be continued. Oftentimes in between firings, I get a little bit like wah wah wah, and then I'm like, okay, got to problem solve again. But that's not the worst thing in the world whatsoever. Eventually, I'm gonna get around to paying attention to the bottom and adding a little bit more. I've got a deeper green, so it's just a bit of a different colorway than this here. So adding a different green on top of that is also going to give it a bit of depth. I seem to have lost all the brown in here, but it's really created this beautiful color swirly marshmallow thing happening too. So I'm not going to touch too much of that whatsoever. So the push-pull continues. The push-pull continues. And then I'll throw them in the kiln, if not today, maybe tomorrow or so, and then we'll see what happens. Anyway, I hope you're doing something fun this weekend. And if you do St. Patrick's Day, well, good on you. That kind of shit does not interest me anymore. So, it's the luck of the something to you. And we'll see you next time on FTV, Forest Studios TV, or Regional Facsimile.